Hey guys, today we're doing the famous eye tutorial. So for this, I'll be using some line art that I'm currently working on of Tokoyami Toa. So she has green eyes and I want to show you how I would do this tutorial for a character with green eyes. So I'm starting with the eyes that I already made. As you can see, I haven't done any detailing yet. So the very first thing I do is I'm going to add eyelashes. So for this, I want to use a super small brush. And I always start by doing a long lash first. Just like that. And then on the other side of the eye, I do another longer lash, but not as long as the first one. And then I do a third lash that I usually try to flip up, like that. And then right at the top, I do a short, pointy eyelash, just like that. And then I'll do the same for the other eye. Okay, so now that that is done, I'm going to merge it down. So one thing you'll notice is that I have two different layers here. So this layer right here is the outline of the eye, because when I color the inside of the eye, I don't want to accidentally cover over the border. So I have this extra line art from when I initially drew the eyes. So now I'm going to take my first step, which is making the eyes two-toned. So I always do a darker color on top. So using her official model to keep it accurate, I'm going to take this green color and then darken it to something that I think is a good match. But I think this shade of green is a good color, so I'm going to start by making an arc for both of her eyes that will represent the darker part of the eye. And this usually takes a few tries to get it right, so keep doing it as many times as you want until you end up with a result that you're happy with. As you can see, I usually color in these, but because I don't duplicate the actual eye, I just have to be careful that I'm not coloring over the black parts of the eyelid. Now that I'm happy with the way the two-tone looks, the next step is to add pupils. So I'm going to make another layer for the pupils, so that way I can adjust them as many times as I want. So I'm going to make an ellipse and fill it in, and do this for both eyes. Now, I don't really like the expression that that's giving her, so what I do a lot is I spend a lot of time moving the pupils around until I get them in a position that I like to make the expression that I want. Okay, so after some adjustments, I think I'm happy with how they look, so I'm going to merge all of this down and then combine it into a single layer group. So from here, I'm going to start taking advantage of clipping masks. So my first step with the clipping mask is to clip a layer, keep it on the normal setting, and pull out a black airbrush. I usually set this to between 6 to 8%, and I want it to be a nice small size. So using this airbrush, I'm going to airbrush black onto the top of her eye so that it kind of starts to fade in with the eyelid on top. This case is a little too big, so I'm going to shrink my airbrush ever so slightly and try again. That attempt went a lot better. So now I'm going to shrink it a little bit more and move over to the other eye and do the same thing. If you don't love how dark it is, you can always move it up a bit so that the gradient adjusts. I think that's a lot better. So always make sure to take an eraser so that any other parts of your face layer, like the eyebrows, aren't being covered up by black. So now that we've done the top part of that, I like to do another layer immediately above that, clipping mask as well, and then switch this black to a red color. I sometimes vary what color I like to use depending on the character, but since she has green eyes, for this case I'm going to use a reddish orange. I'm going to make the airbrush really small, and I am going to take it and use it on the inside of the eye. This just provides a bit of color and contrast. And I'm also going to take it and use it on the tips of the eyelash. Oh my god, eyelid. I can't use words correctly. And then on the other side, I'm going to do the same thing over here. Use it on the inside And then over on this part, I'm going to use it right on the edge right here. I'm also going to be playing a lot with the hair layer, turning it on and off so I can make sure I'm seeing the eye correctly. But then you're going to want to take the eraser and clear the eye of any red. I always just double check the eyebrows to make sure. Same for this eye, we're going to clear the inside of red, while making sure not to accidentally remove the red from where it's supposed to be. And now we're ready for the more fun parts. So the next thing I'm going to do is set a layer to the add mode and use clipping mask. So this is the part where the two-tone eyes come in. So for a character like Toa, if I look at her model, it's like a greenish yellow color. So I'm going to select the greenish yellow color, which is pretty similar to the color I use for the rest of her eye, but it's going to become really bright. So I'm going to make this airbrush larger, and I'm going to start coloring right under the bottom part of her eye. I always do circular motions, so the color starts to creep up without being overbearing. And then the size sometimes varies depending on the airbrush, but using the tool, I like to resize it until it's covering a part of the eye that I like. So keep in mind, we're going to do 2 layers of this, so you don't want the first layer to be completely overpowering, because then there would be no need for a second and it wouldn't look as good. So over on the second eye, I'm going to do the same thing and start coloring in circles at the bottom of the eye and stopping when I think it looks good. This one looks like it has the slightest bit more yellow than the first eye, so I'm going to select my tool and drag it down a bit, making sure to use my eraser again, not just for the mouth and nose, but also for the eyelids. And then from there, I'm doing a similar thing, and I have to pick a second color. Sometimes I use the same color, sometimes I don't. I think for Toa, I want to use white. So I'm going to make sure to clip this one as well, and I'm going to do the same thing, making circular motions below the eye, and you'll see bits of white starting to creep up in there. I think that's enough. See, this one's a little large, and because of her eyes in particular, you don't need a huge amount of white. Characters with monochromatic eyes are pretty easy to color. It's the ones that have maybe like flame colored eyes where you really want to make sure to get all the colors in. But for Toa, I think just the slightest bit of white at the bottom to provide some lighter contrast is all that's needed. So now I'm going to do the same for the other eye. And again, what you're going to want to do is going to vary by the color of the eye. Some colors are just harder to work with than others, but this is a pretty good general example of what I do. So we're going to shrink the white again, making sure to just get a little bit of white in there. So now that I think about it, I might want to use a slight yellow hint for this one to make the effects a little more subtle. Again, when doing eyes, it's important to not make them too bright. But I think right here we found a good mix. So we're going to clear the eyelids again, clear the face, and now we've done all the base coloring for the eyes. Okay, so now we get to add fun stuff into the eyes. So for Toa, I have to pick what color I want to use to complement her eyes. So given that she has a lot of purple and pink highlights, I think I'm going to end up using a purple similar to the color of her hair. Alright, so now I'm going to draw a little triangle shape and a circle shape in both eyes. And I always do the triangle on the larger end of the eye that's cut off. Okay, so now that I have the shapes that I want, I'm going to make another layer, but decrease the opacity. And so I make this little hook shape on both eyes of the same color but lighter, just to kind of add a little more going on there. And then I'm going to adjust the opacity until I get to a color that I like. And then I'm going to do a third and final layer like this, where I use a color that surrounds the pupil. And I'm going to do 2 little circles on the inside of the pupil, but I encourage you to do whatever design you like. Don't follow one-to-one what I'm doing. Make sure to put your own spin on it. But then I'm going to take this down just a little bit so that the 2 colors match as close as they can. 99% it is. And then I'm going to make another add layer. So now I'm going to switch it over to white and start making a series of circles in the bottom of the eye. So right below the pupil, I'm going to make the first circle and then 2 smaller ones on the side. Go over to my other eye and do the same thing. And then coming back over to my first eye, I'm going to make a series of 3 ovals on both sides of the pupil. And then come over to my second eye and do the same thing. And then something I like to do is drag these so that they're as close to centered between the side of the eye and the pupil as they possibly can be. You don't have to do this, I just do this because I'm a stickler for making things look even. Okay, so now that we have our white in there, I'm going to go back to opacity, and I typically try to adjust this until I see the white fade a little bit and you can see some of the color below bleeding through, but you should adjust it to whatever level fits the character you're drawing. And then once that's done, I'm going to turn the background color off, so then that way I can erase the white that sticks out. Okay, so now we get to one of my favorite parts, which is where I put it back on add, and I switch to my technical pen. And this is where I add the glowing effects. So I'm going to make a series of little dots within the eye. I don't want to make them look too big. It's important to making the eye look like it's glowing. And I usually do this in a couple different colors, usually about 3. So in this case, since her colors are like purple and pink, I'm going to include bright purple. And as you can see, the purple doesn't show up as well on the green color, so that's why I try to include more of it on the top. And then I'm going to switch over to a shade of pink and add it to the other side. And then to finish it out, I always do a darker color of whatever the main eye color is. So in this case, it's green, so I'm going to add some dark green in there. It doesn't really provide like a lot of shimmer. It's just kind of a muted color to fill in some of the spots of the eye that weren't covered. So now the eye looks all shiny. And then I'm going to go and make a layer above the line art of the eye. Go back to my studio pen. This point I'm going to turn the background color off again. So as you can see, the eyes go this way. So I'm going to want to make an oval on the left side of the eye. This varies depending on which way I have the character facing. If they're facing front, I kind of just go with whatever I'm feeling like. So I'm going to make an oval, and then I'm going to make a large circle at the other corner, and then a smaller circle up top. And then do the same thing over here. Make our large oval, build that puppy in. Going to make the second larger circle over here, and then our smallest one up top. And before turning the background back on, I'm going to select a color that I think would go well with the eye. In this case, I want to do light green. I'm going to switch it back to my technical pen, make the size a little bigger, and I'm going to draw an outline of the eye, but only on the bottom half. This is to make it stand out against the skin and the back part of the eye when I eventually color this. So even though it doesn't really seem to make a difference now, it will later. And then I'm going to take my airbrush, just go over the edges the slightest bit to soften it up, and then turn my background color back on. So in this case, I like the green, so we're going to go with it. And then there's just one more step. So I'm going to go back in between these black and red layers, and I'm going to switch to white and use my studio pen. And here I'm going to make little ovals above the eye, just to kind of add a little bit of light into the eyelid. These also can kind of help direct where her attention looks like it's going. So I think it's pretty important to place them in a location that fits. So after making a few small changes, this is how it looks. Obviously the eyes look a lot more completed when you add a little bit of gray to the background when you're coloring, but this is how my eyes always look in the completed line art. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I've never done an art tutorial before, but because this was for the special 1,000 subscriber milestone, and people have been asking me to show how I do eyes for years, I figured you guys might enjoy this. So I really hope that this was of some help to you. I really hope you like the eyes. I mean, look at them, they're so pretty. If you have any ideas for what you'd want to see for the 10,000 subscriber special, or you have any questions about drawing eyes, please feel free to comment them and I will happily respond to them. So thank you guys so much for watching and happy drawing! Okay, see ya!